In 2008, a small group of international scholars and activists met over 3 days in the heart of the Canadian prairies to storytell, ponder, and discuss our collective crisis of human relationship with our Earth Mother. We represented a diverse range of interests, disciplines, cultural identities, ancestral histories, and geographies. Our commonality was our deep concern for the well-being of Mother Earth, and the belief that an important path to planetary human healing lay in Indigenous worldviews and the recovery of these within all peoples.
The University of Saskatchewan recently hosted a Human Ecology Week to examine how people relate to each other and the world around them. A presentation at Mayfair United Church dealt with issues related to human migration.
We've been discussing how a human ecology framework can be applied to issues of immigration and human rights. So essentially, by human ecology, we're really talking about the nature of our deep connectedness between human beings, but also about our relationship and our interconnection with the earth and putting these things together. So we've had a very interesting week discussing these different issues, and we've also talked about how it's also related to the need for people to develop a real relationship of belonging to the land, so care for each other, but also an ethic of care for the land.
One result of our time together was the publication of the book Radical Human Ecology, Intercultural and Indigenous Approaches, a collection of essays by 22 scholars from around the world which pioneers new directions in human-environmental relationships and applies head, heart and hand to our collective and common good.
In the fall of 2012 and spring of 2013, two of the editors, Lewis Williams and Rose Roberts, launched the Radical Human Ecology Dialogue series across Canada. Dialogues were held in Toronto, Saskatoon, Edmonton and Victoria, Canada. This video captures a synopsis of these conversations and is an introduction to the Radical Human Ecology work. These community conversations represent the collective experiences of Radical Human Ecology contributors, invited speakers and companion journeyers about what it means to be fully human today.
Kia ora tātou. I'm Lewis Williams, founder, Koro International Network and Associate Professor, University of Southern Queensland. The community conversations you're about to see are in many ways at the heart of what Radical Human Ecology is about. Refinding the interconnected spaces between ourselves as humans and in our relationships with the Earth community. The dialogues represent these processes of reconnecting in action. In a sense, they are about bringing the words in our book to life. Later on in this film, you will hear one of the participants say, "If we don't have our food, we have nothing." And that really is the bottom line. Western approaches alone to human progress and sustainability just haven't done it for us. We need to reconnect in a much deeper way, and we need other worldviews and cultural traditions to help us, particularly ones that have been pushed aside, such as Indigenous and other traditional worldviews. You will notice, for example, that we have included a clip of a toxicologist's learnings about water as a sacred being from her work with Indigenous communities in Saskatchewan, Canada. And we have also included a clip on the wisdom tradition of Sufism and its relevance to human environmental relationships from a psychologist from Pakistan who now lives in Saskatchewan. Both from very different cultural traditions, but each with the same fundamental message about the deep interconnectedness of life. We have organised the material so that it gradually works its way through the themes of head, heart and hand, from philosophical questions to matters of the heart and then to more practical issues of human action. As you watch, you might find it helpful to hold two questions in mind. What does it mean to you to live in harmony with all of life? And what does it mean to hold the complexity of these relationships? As you will begin to see, the work takes all cultures, generations, disciplines, and even species. Enjoy.
Radical human ecology is about our true reality, who we are, how we are, and how it all is. Our universal relatedness, in other words. It's an opportunity for the reader to come to know just that, and I mean know in the deepest sense of its meaning. An opportunity to see and experience the world through new and fresh eyes. To engage head and heart, and ideally hands in some way, to bring those knowings out further into all our diverse communities and disciplines. I invite you and I welcome you to step in to this rich and generous counsel of wisdom.
So the chapter I wrote is called The Place of Creation. And that's a multi-layered title, of course, because it's the whole earth is a place of creation, the whole universe is a place of creation. And as we do our work, that's a place of creation. And I think there's also places in us, usually the most vulnerable places in us, that are places of creation. And maybe that's why they're so dangerous sometimes to express, because they're deep and powerful and connected to all of the rest of creation. So those are places, when we speak from there, that are deep and dangerous and challenging to the powers that be.
One of the conversations we've had before is really this work is about how to be a human being, which sounds really easy, and it's not. It's maybe simple, and I think in all of the 20 chapters, people are grappling with this in one way or another. How do we be human beings at this particular time?
It seems like only human beings are confused about their role on this earth. Mm-hmm. You know, like you know, a moose doesn't ask himself, well, what am I supposed to be doing? Yeah. You know, and you know, they know their place. Everything else knows its place, and human beings constantly are questioning and doubting and changing their minds, and you know. But I really believe it's possible for us to be just human beings together.
So my first chapter, what can I say? It's about my journey to, I suppose, the Indigenous part of myself. It's about my journey to what is underneath, what really is the nature of reality. And I think in terms of, for all of us, I'm sure, if we think, how can we be the best human being that we can be, then surely an important question there is, what is the nature of reality? What is the nature of my reality? Because if I think that rock's a dead rock, right, well, I'm not going to really treat it as I might if I think of it as an alive rock. Yeah? The same with the oceans, the same with the trees. So I think this is a very important question.
As a toxicologist, I work with First Nations communities, looking at the challenges and barriers to accessing safe drinking water. And as a result of that, I've reflected how we view water in modern society. And if you look back over time and in history, water was very sacred, very spiritual. It was utilized for cultural ceremony. But over time, as a result of industrialization and the growth in the human population, it has seen as a commodity. And it is something that is now seen as owned rather than shared. Through my research with communities, I've learned that water is a spirit. It connects all living things. And if you think about it, water is the thing that connects everyone. Because without, and all living things, because without it, there would be no.
Sufism proposes a really complex way of connecting with everybody. It just views an essence which is universal and which is divine, and sees that essence in every living being, including the stones, including the earth, including the water. Sufis see that essence in everything which is the creation of what they call supreme consciousness.
There's no doubt in my mind. I just turned 65. I'm trying to figure out how to be older, that this whole essence of getting to a way of seeing ourselves as one part of this great world, just one part, is so important.
I went to residential school for 7 years, and before then my grandmother raised me for 3 years, and she was a medicine woman. And my mom was in a sanatorium, so I didn't know, I thought she was dead because nobody told me why she was away when I was a little girl. So for the 3 years of my life I was with my nukum, and then I went to residential school for 7 years. So my memory went to sleep during that period of time when I had watched her she was a medicine woman. My 4 grandmothers were all medicine women, and they all had sweat lodges. And my grandfathers were all the Uskapes, where they looked after the sweat lodge. And so when I went to residential school, all of that was forgotten. It literally was forgotten. I mean, the whole ritual was still there, but I never thought about it because it was something that wasn't encouraged. And so my journey back to my community began in 1973. And what I'm finding with people in my vintage, and I'm getting real old, is that many of us have started in the 70s, those of us who were trained in residential school, going back to, and resurrecting all that lost knowledge. So it's a long journey, and what we're doing is helping each other collect the knowledge and the information. And I went into psychotherapy when I was 24. I had a wonderful psychiatrist because I had big issues to deal with residential school, the issues of abandonment and insecurity and not being confident and being shamed and all of that stuff. And because I also grew up with family violence and the addictions. Both my parents went to residential school, so all of this combination of the family trauma, including, of course, the colonization that entrapped my family on a reserve. And so it's a lot of psychodynamics that hits the soul and the spirit.
And as I sat here, I realized another thing that drew me here tonight is my own ancestry. You know, English, also Scottish, Irish, the Celts. So we had the English invading the Celts, the Celtic culture. We had both cultures invading this continent here. And yet I am of this place. I was born here as well. And so it sort of touches that first question that Lewis put up there. You're really living in harmony with life and holding the complexity. And I think it also touches on what we heard from the first 2 voices, just that when people were wondering about where's the more than human in the title, it goes back to, I think, something that Brenda said earlier about, well, we're to figure out who the hell we are first.
Think again about the 2 questions I posed earlier. What does it mean to you to live in harmony with all of life? And what does it mean to hold the complexity of these relationships? We've just seen, for example, Louise Huff, a Cree elder and residential school survivor, talk about some of her healing journey and reconnecting with the traditions of her people that was so brutally wiped away by colonisation. You then heard James Wells of Toronto, whose ancestors are relative newcomers to Canada, allude to the need to belong to a place and to be of a place, or in a sense, developing a sense of indigeneity to place while respecting the traditions of First Peoples, and perhaps being aware of the privileges that can go with being white. Radical human ecology or intercultural and Indigenous approaches are complex. Intercultural work is complex. Yet we need to heal, and our planet needs to heal, and it can only be a collective effort. Next, you'll hear about some perspectives about putting our hands to the wheel and this critical juncture in our human history.
I feel like there needs to be almost like a drastic re-envisioning of education overall. And I think that's what really has brought me to this book and this community, is because education is like almost one aspect of community and learning and understanding, and coming to that understanding of what it is to be human and why we are here on this land and learning in this way. But also, I guess, remembering and continuing on the knowledge of our ancestors and of those that have come before us. So that's kind of my journey. I also have conflicts of identity and connection to this earth. So I guess that's the part of me being lost and yet found. I guess important for me to discover my Indigenous knowledge. I recently found out I was Métis, and it's been kind of kept silent. Excuse me. And I think just bringing that knowledge forward was a huge moment for me. It was like something that was blocked in me for a long time just has opened up. And so I guess with Ema, I really connect on the idea of trauma and not knowing where I come from or where it started, and yet knowing there's somewhere I need to go.
I was thinking radical human ecology, and our brothers and sisters have talked about how the radicalness is in the history. It's in the way that things were for centuries before we got here. And I was trying to rack my brain to think of an Aboriginal culture that would go onto a landscape and actually devastate it to start from nothing to say that that was progress. And I can't think of any. And I think it's time now for our Aboriginal brothers and sisters to take their responsibility, to show us how to be radical in the old ways and reconnecting with the earth, and us being receptive to learning. Let's face it, a lot of our grandparents, our great-grandparents came here to get away from something. So they wanted everything brand new. They didn't want to carry a lot of their history with them. And here we have a richness of how many different Aboriginal cultures here to pick from, and they all do the same thing in the same way, which is gathering what they need from the land and leaving the rest to prosper.
And it was all the same message. If we don't have our food, we have nothing. If we can't live up here and survive with our own hands and our own will, we have nothing. What do we do if the barge or the ferry doesn't come in? We need to keep these lands and these waters as clean and as true to their original form as possible.
She was here in the Indigenous worldview, in the ancient worldview, in the worldview that many of us are in, of this is how we think, right? And then way over here is trees are money, that's it. Or stock price, And then, but the bridge was so far that she couldn't even begin to walk across that conceptual bridge from where we are to where that other way of thinking is. And And I really believe that that's our challenge. That's our challenge, is that here we are in this worldview, and here are these incredibly powerful forces that are absolutely enslaved to this worldview, and there's a bridge between us. And if we stand on our side of the bridge and we yell as loud as we can, most of the time people are so far over and so buried that they can't even hear us. So we have to start going across the bridge to like get there, but we start to compromise. And then pretty soon we pretty soon we look back and we're so far away from our own place, our own home, you know? So what do we do then? What do we do? How do we accelerate the coming together, and how do we accelerate and advance this idea of connectedness? And I believe it's one of my practices and beliefs is that it's ceremony, that it's affecting people's spirit and waking their spirit up, as opposed to trying to make anybody right or make anybody wrong. You know, it'll be forever before we'll all be right and everybody else will all be wrong. It'll take us forever to get there. So it's about tickling and waking up that spirit through ceremony and ritual or whatever strategies we can come up with. So that's my probably too long-winded thought, and I appreciate the chance to share a few words, and I look forward to the rest of our conversation, and thanks for listening.
So it's about finding those interconnected spaces. How do we operate as human beings at all? And, you know, in the way that I pray, it's all my relations. You end off the prayer in all my relations. So we're all interconnected, not only as human beings, but also in the way that we live within the earth. And last night someone asked me, tell me in one sentence what radical human ecology is. And I just looked at him and I said, well, it's the way human beings interact with Mother Earth. And that's about as simple as I can make it, but that's also as expansive as I can make it. And in the chapter that I wrote, it's about being respectful in the way we interact, not only with each other, but the way with Mother Earth. And I am a mother. I have 2 children, and my responsibility as a mother is to care for them, but it's also my responsibility to discipline them. And that's what we're seeing now in the way that Mother Earth is reacting to us. She is disciplining us because we are not looking after her, and we are not showing the respect that we have for her in terms of how she provides us with the air that we breathe, with all the food that we eat. So it's about establishing that connection. And just the way that I live my life now and the teaching that I've done, it's helping youth to find that connection to the earth. And even among the youth in First Nations communities, that's what's missing, in that connection, that spirituality, because it's been lost. So what radical human ecology means to every one of us is going to be different. And part of our life path is finding that connection. And, you know, at higher education, that's what it's all about, right? You have all these opportunities to learn different worldviews, different ways of seeing the world, and to take that knowledge and go out into the world and see what it is that you want to do with it.